Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today I will be introducing you to the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So to explain, the Warhammer 40,000 universe is the setting for the Warhammer 40,000 tabletop wargame. It is an interesting universe which has been created over the last 30 to 40 years in an effort to give more detail and background to the tabletop game. However, it has greatly evolved beyond that and is the subject of many books and other settings, including this YouTube channel. Now, the universe is quite vast and complex, so I will be boiling it down today into simple settings and factions. However, the videos on this channel will go into far more detail and will explain some of the concepts that I will be bringing up today. The Warhammer 40,000 universe is effectively told from the perspective of the Imperium of Mankind. This is the government and structure of humanity in the 41st millennium. It is based on an Imperium constructed by a God Emperor known as the God Emperor of Mankind. He built this Imperium himself using a great crusade and armies of genetically engineered super soldiers in order to bring humanity back together as one entity after spending 5,000 years in a dystopian technological dark age where after spreading out into the galaxy they lost their ability to travel between stars and had been isolated and devolved quite severely as a culture. He was a divine entity, although he didn't claim to be a god. He was an ancient being created on Earth to combat another force in the galaxy known as Chaos, which exists in another dimension known as the Warp. The Emperor conquered large parts of the galaxy, however, the gods of the Warp, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Khorne and Slaanesh, all had plans on the material universe which they couldn't bring to fruition with the Emperor standing guard, and so they plotted to destroy him. They turned half of his genetically engineered sons, huge superhuman soldiers known as the Trademarks, who led his genetically enhanced armies. 9 of the 18 sons turned against their father for various reasons, although the leader among them was Horus. He had felt slighted by the Emperor despite being the greatest of the Primarchs and ended turning to Chaos, although there was some mind manipulation involved. He went to war with the Imperium, and in the 31st millennium, the Imperium nearly tore itself apart. However, thanks to the sacrifices of many, Horus was eventually defeated, and the Emperor was able to destroy him. However, the battle with Horus had destroyed the Emperor as well. He was so badly damaged he required constant life support, despite being a near-divine entity. He was interred on a device known as the Golden Throne. It was used to open portals and create a vast transport network for humanity, but alas, was no longer able to do that. It was keeping closed a rift into the Warp which would destroy Terra, Earth, in the 41st millennium, and he couldn't allow that to happen. 10,000 years later, he still sits upon the Golden Throne, the Emperor of Mankind, a god, and the leader of humanity. The whole of the Imperium is dedicated to him as a god, despite his wishes not to be one. However, it has kept humanity together all this time. The problem with this, of course, is that the Imperium has become so dedicated to the Emperor they no longer can think originally about their situation. They are locked in constant conflict with other factions within the galaxy, and have a constant war ongoing with Chaos and the traitors from the 31st millennium. But they cannot look to improving themselves whilst this war goes on. The Imperium has devolved into a fanatical state of constant violence, hatred and terror. Their principles can be founded upon the worst elements of fascism, communism, and a theocracy, with the numerous and innumerable hatreds against all others considered the only aspect of dogma that is followed by almost every element of humanity. It is horrifying, cruel, and sad to see a descent from humanity's golden age into such a vast pit of despair. However, in a galaxy bent on your destruction, it is the only place humanity has strength. In order to maintain its power, the Imperium relies on several different military forces. There are the Adeptus Astartes, or the Space Marines. These are the genetic super soldiers that were originally used to help the Emperor conquer the galaxy. Now, 10,000 years later, they are the protectors of the Imperium and the destroyers of the enemies of the Imperium. They are limited in number, with only several million being in existence at any one time, in a galaxy populated by hundreds of trillions of humans. However, their power is incredible. They are beyond human, and wear armour known as power armour that enhances their capabilities even further. They are able to bring war to even the deadliest of enemies, and their fanatical devotion to their duty is enough to keep them sane in a universe gone mad. Alongside the Space Marines are the much more numerous Imperial Guard, also known as the Astra Militarum. They number in their trillions compared to the millions of Space Marines. However, their equipment varies greatly, and they are by no means genetic super soldiers. They are the equivalent of conscripts in many cases, given a weapon, given some basic armour, very basic training, and told to go and fight on the vast battlefields of the Imperium. They die by their hundreds of thousands every moment, and the Imperium is kept alive by their sacrifice. However, despite their lack of power, their numbers more than make up for their strength. There is another force that commands war machines but also maintains the technology of the Imperium, known as the Mechanicum. The Mechanicum itself is dedicated as a religious organisation, believing in the God Machine, or the Omnissiah, who in their mind controls all machinery and provides all power to the machine spirits, which allow machines to operate. We find this very strange, as it is kind of an anathema in modern society for technology and religion to be as one. However, in a universe where the ancient technologies of mankind far outclass the current technologies of the modern day, they revere the ancient designs much more like a religion would than a scientific organisation or a mechanical one. And so their designs and their innovations are mostly restricted to what they can find from the past, as opposed to innovating and finding new methods of developing to the future, which they find heretical and dangerous. One of the key components of the Mechanicus is to hunt down ancient artifacts and materials from this empire that fell long ago, and using those to develop new weaponry for the Imperium based on ancient designs. This has led to some incredible marvels in the form of the War Titans or the starships that they used in the Imperium, but a lot of these things are slowly becoming ancient. They are being destroyed by time, and the Mechanicum, through entropy, has lost the ability to create new ones, which means that slowly the Imperium is losing its control over its own technology, and soon, if something is not done, they'll be reverted back to a time known as the Age of Strife, where humanity was unable to lift itself from one planet and travel the stars. Beyond the Mechanicum, there are other forces within the Imperium that help protect and preserve it. There is the Adeptus Arbites, a kind of special police force which goes around enforcing the laws of the Imperium on planets. There's the Adeptus Administratum, which deals with all the data within the Imperium, and the Ecclesiarchy, the religious arm of the Imperium, which deals with the preaching of the Imperial Creed, honouring the Emperor above all others. There are the rogue traders, very powerful individuals who own starships and travel the warp lanes, providing goods and materials, and with almost infinite power beyond that of the Imperium. And there's also the Inquisition. The Inquisition is technically a military faction, although its purview is the protection of the Imperium from internal and external threats, on a micro level more than a macro level. They have near infinite power, provided to them by the Council of Terra, technically in the name of the Emperor. They are able to question who they wish, use methods that they like, and are able to do whatever they can in order to destroy the enemies of the Imperium from within. They are divided into three orders: the Ordo Malleus, who deal with demons who've infiltrated the Imperium; the Ordo Xenos, who deal with aliens; and the Ordo Hereticus, who deal with any of those who go against the Emperor. They also have military forces dedicated to them: the Death Watch for the Xenos, the Grey Knights for the Malleus, and the Sisters of Battle for the Hereticus, a female order dedicated to the will and power of the Emperor. The Imperium itself is technically a rotting husk. It is on the verge of collapse. However, the sheer willpower of humanity who live within the Imperium are what is keeping it alive, and has kept it alive for 10,000 years. However, its time may soon be up, and I will explain more of that later. Moving on from the Imperium, I mentioned briefly that there is another faction who has sought the destruction of humanity and the Emperor for a long time, that of Chaos. The Chaos faction resides within the Warp. Sometimes people equate the Warp to Chaos, however, they are technically different entities. The Warp is a realm. It is a realm of thought and power. It is not like the physical universe and does not operate under the same rules. Within the Warp there are other entities, powers, cruel and strange, but they are numerous and unknowable. Chaos resides within that. They are also Warp entities, based around 4 Chaos gods, as I mentioned: Slaanesh, Nurgle, Khorne, and Tzeentch. They are as powerful as gods, and they would reach into the material universe and take control over there if they could, for it is the souls of living creatures within the material universe that provides their sustenance and their power, which they feed upon in order to become greater than they are now. In order to provide for themselves and fight their wars, originally Chaos had their demons, creatures dedicated to the Chaos gods, who are, in numerous forms, used to strike out of warp rifts into the galaxy. However, they are limited and cannot spend time outside the warp, and so, with careful machinations, the powers of Chaos corrupted half of the Imperium's Great Crusade forces, who then turned to Chaos and worshipped them as gods, against the Emperor. They fought the Imperium and lost during the Horus Heresy 10,000 years before the current date, but they still feel that resentment and survive to this day, existing within the warp, outside time almost, and able to strike at the Imperium as they wish. The most powerful of these are the Chaos Space Marines. They are like the Space Marines of the Imperium, but ancient and evil, given new weapons and power by their Chaos gods, and in return have had their shackles removed of dedication and faith towards those who do not fight for themselves. From their perspective, they are truly free. But they are not alone as combatants against the Imperium. There are also the Dark Mechanicus, again a dark mirror of the Mechanicus of the Imperium, given over to demonic invention, able to use the powers of the warp to invent new and terrible machines that combine demon and machine into one evil entity. There are also the warbands, mere humans and other races, who have dedicated themselves to chaos, feeling that their lives in the material universe were weird and wrong, not liking the authority that was imposed upon them by those they didn't elect or choose. And so, they have chosen Chaos, who demand their souls as payment, but give them freedom as well. Moving beyond Chaos, there are other factions in the Milky Way galaxy that are powerful enough to mention here. The first of these are the Eldar. The Eldar are an interesting race. If you've ever seen them, they do resemble the elves of fantasy. However, they have a slightly more alien nature to them within Warhammer 40,000. The Eldar had an ancient and powerful empire that spanned the galaxy even before humanity was a race on Earth and not just a series of primates. However, they were very strongly linked to the warp and had incredibly powerful emotion within them. The thing about the warp is that it reflects the emotions of a race. And if a race becomes powerful enough, especially the psychically attuned Eldar, they can cause great disturbances within the warp. The Eldar race was once a powerful and shining empire that devolved into debauchery, hedonism and violence in order to satiate a lust for pleasure in a universe where they had no challenges remaining to them. This led to the birth of the Chaos god Slaanesh, and consumed a large portion of their empire in its birth. Because of this, the Eldar are now broken, fragmented, and on the decline. There are only two major factions of the Eldar in the galaxy, with a few others to note, but not at the same power level. There are the Craftworld Eldar, which were originally refugees from this empire, who had decided to evacuate because they saw the coming darkness from the actions of the empire. They are incredibly rigid in their thinking, for they are dedicated to not devolving into debauchery and hedonism, and trying to maintain a pure line of thought to prevent another tragedy like that of Slaanesh and the Fall. This has led to them leading very regimented lives, going into certain aspects and castes for part of their lives in order to focus solely on one thing and prevent their minds from wandering to other pleasures. This has led to very dedicated fighting forces of very specialist units, such as the Dire Avengers, the Striking Scorpions, all of which dedicate themselves to one form of combat after a figure that they revere. Once they have completed their training and spent time in this aspect, they may or may not move on to others. However, some may dedicate their lives to a very specific aspect. Whilst this can be considered dangerous for some, it is a way for them to provide a stability to other Eldar who are seeking a certain path. They also use unique technology. It is grown, rather than made, from something known as Wraithbone. Wraithbone is a psychically active material and forms the hulls of their starships, the materials for their vehicles, and the compositions of their weapons. It is an incredibly versatile material and is used in almost all things by the Eldar. It also helps augment their technology, which is mainly based on crystals, and their culture is very reminiscent of that of ancient Japanese culture, mixed in with other European flares in order to provide them with a very unique look. Beyond the Craftworld Eldar are another race known as the Dark Eldar. Now, the Dark Eldar are technically similar to the Craftworld Eldar, but they have cut themselves off from their psychic powers and have chosen not to live lives of austerity and dedication. They live very much like their ancient empire did, but hidden away in the Webway, away from the evil that tried to destroy them. Now, the Webway was an ancient system of tunnels through the warp created by a race known as the Old Ones and then augmented by the Eldar Empire. And within this Webway, this city, known as Kamorga, exists, where the Dark Eldar launch raids into the material universe for slaves. The reason they need slaves? Because what sustains them is pain, agony, and the suffering of others, which provides them life force which they feed upon, and prevents them from dying and then being consumed by Slanesh, the god that was created when the Eldar fell. Many Dark Eldar are thousands of years old, and can owe their existence to this pain that they cause. This means the primary reason that they fight other races is to gain slaves, meaning that they usually only issue raids rather than have full combat battles on battlefields, much like the other races of the 41st millennium. However, they are capable of wielding a significant fighting force if needed. They are a disparate people, where political alliances and other allegiances tend to shift and change daily. Their machinations dark and vile. They use underhanded means like blackmail, poisoning, and just straight-up assassination when trying to gain power amongst both their enemies and even sometimes their friends, if it ever could be said that they have any friends. And all other types of vile politics take place regularly on the streets of Kamorga. And if it was not for the physical similarity, it would be almost impossible to tell that the Craftworld Eldar and the Dark Eldar were the same race. It should be noted to the Imperium, both races are the same. They are all considered Eldar, and the Dark Eldar have tainted Craftworld Eldar's reputation with the Imperium, even though the Imperium has a low opinion of Xenos aliens already. Next up is another race known as the Orks. That's with a K, not a C. The Orks are an interesting race. They are spelt with a K to start with, as they live primarily and only for war and devastation. They are violent beyond measure and seek to hurt, maim and kill whatever they can find, usually enemy races and sometimes their own. They are led by the biggest and strongest of them, usually known as a war boss, who sometimes unites them in vast wars, crusades which lead them across the galaxy in vast swaths of devastation. They are also unique in that they have very little creative power on their own. A lot of their technology is scavenged and salvaged from the Imperium and others. However, most of it looks like it should not work. It is mashed together, very rarely used with technological finesse, and half the time appears to be just a random assortment of trash. However, somehow, through some unexplained psychic means, the Orks can use the power of the Wa, the psychic might of a horde of Orks, to cause these machines to work. Mere thought that they work allows them to work, in a strange bending of reality that must link into the warp somehow, but is very poorly explained in universe. All I can tell you is that as far as an Ork is concerned, so long as it's painted red, it goes faster, and so long as it looks like a gun, it goes bang. They are also unique in that they are not just an animal race, but they are also combined with a fungus. Why this is unique is that it means that the Orks have no gender, although they do appear male to humanity. They are a race that reproduces by releasing spores, which are very hardy and difficult to destroy. This means that even if a population of Orks is completely destroyed, if you're not very careful, you soon may be faced with another population of Orks just as angry and more savage than their parents, who you destroyed. It also means that the Orks, due to their fungus nature, are actually very hardy. They can regrow limbs and other pieces of body part without actually requiring much medical attention. They also don't require that much food, their green pigmentation actually being a form of photosynthesis in their skin, which allows them to generate energy merely from sunlight, which allows them to operate without having to rely on a stable food chain, which they probably couldn't maintain even if they tried. Beyond the Orks are another race, which were technically the race that the Orks were created to fight, along with the Eldar and others. They are the Necrons. Originally a race known as the Necron tier, they were sickly and damaged by their local star that gave off vast amounts of radiation. So they sought immortality. and through that made a deal with vast entities known as the Catan or Satan star gods. These entities were energy vampires and promised that if the Necron tier created metallic bodies of living metal from their incredibly advanced technology, they would be able to transfer the souls of the Necron tier into these bodies and allow them to live forever. They were only partially correct. The Satan betrayed the Necron tier and consumed their souls whilst transferring only their minds into these bodies. These bodies were not complex enough for many of the minds of the citizens of the Necron tier, and so they became merely metal automatons with no original thought of their own, controlled primarily by their lords. The Necron lords, luckily for them, were in more complicated bodies that allowed them to retain their personality and skills from life. However, they were trapped in metallic cold coffins, only looking out, never able to truly interact with the universe again, that allowed for feeling or the showing of emotion. They became the Necron race, and for the betrayal of the Star Gods who consumed the souls of the Necron tier, the Necrons destroyed the Star Gods, casting them into pieces across the galaxy. However, their war, which they had been fighting with a race known as the Old Ones, who created the Eldar and the Ork, had destroyed large portions of the galaxy, and it was not a galaxy worth ruling anymore. The Necrons went into hibernation. In a motif very similar to ancient Egyptian myth, they then came back to life. They are returning to the galaxy found full of living entities which they can rule over, and they choose to do so through conflict and war. They are an unstoppable enemy, with almost indestructible bodies, and only supreme firepower and incredible skill are able to prevent these armies from overtaking large swaths of the Imperium. Thankfully, only a small number of the Necrons have woken thus far, but there is rumour that there are plenty more where those have come from. Finally today, there are two other races which are technically not linked to the warp like the other races were. There are the Tau and the Tyranids. The Tau are another Xenos race who exist in the galactic east from Imperial maps, who have very recently risen to power in terms of the Imperium. They are a very young race, having evolved to sentience in the last 10,000 years, if not less. And they are a dedicated, technologically advanced species whose primary concern is spreading something known as the greater good. Now, the Tau in the past nearly destroyed themselves until the Ethereals, a specialist race of Tau, turned up and started preaching this greater good. The Tau dedicated themselves to this and have survived into the 41st millennium. They are a powerful race who are technologically advanced. They have quickly overcome the technological limits of the Imperium, who still worship the god machine and don't wish to make any innovation. And the Tau have been able to avoid that, becoming incredibly powerful technologically. They have weapons and armaments that surpass the Imperium totally. However, they lack both the numbers of the Imperium, and they also lack the close combat prowess that the Imperium can also boast through its Space Marines and others. In order to overcome this, the Tau Empire actually encompasses many other minor races like the Kroot or the Vespid, and even some human worlds, who have been integrated into the Tau Empire and dedicated themselves to the greater good, allowing the Tau to expand their arsenal and fill gaps in their war machine. However, there is a darker side to this race, for although they appear to be what we would consider good from the perspective of current-day Earth, they have a dark side, which is they sterilize, supposedly, their client races, in order for those races to become completely subservient and not be able to overthrow the Tau through force of numbers later down the line. However, to all intents and purposes, the Tau are a race new to the galactic stage, but rapidly becoming a power to rival that of the Imperium. Now, the final race, as I mentioned, is the Tyranids. The Tyranids are completely different to everything else that we've mentioned. They are less a race of people and more a vast, all-consuming organism. They have approached from beyond the galaxy, and they have crossed the vast void between galaxies, using their biological ships. Arriving in the Milky Way, their only objective appears to be to consume, to make more Tyranid by completely stripping planets of their biosphere. So efficient are they that they are like a planet virus, completely obliterating any ecology they come across and fighting any resistant organisms on that world. The Imperium has lost many worlds to the Tyranid, who have no defining leader, apart from something known as the hive mind, a great directing intellect that is forcing them forward, and using their massive biological war machines and biological weapons, both ranged and close combat, they are ripping swaths across the galaxy. There have been 3 hive fleets so far that are of any major size, but it is suspected that soon the vast bulk of the Tyranid life form will arrive, and at that point, all the races of the galaxy may have to join together to fight this vast organism, who may, if they don't, completely strip the Milky Way of all life. So those are all the major factions within the Warhammer 40,000 universe. As you can tell, the universe itself is grim and dark. It is full of violence and hatred. But it's also a place where the last vestiges of hope remain. The Pandora's box of a universe, where all the evil is already out in the world, and either everything can get better or everything will be destroyed. Hopefully, we will be able to see more of that story as it evolves. The Warhammer 40,000 story is a living entity, and it continues to change and grow as we go. So this channel has been dedicated to trying to provide you with that information as it grows and changes, to provide you with a place where you can start looking into the Warhammer 40,000 universe and then go from there. And hopefully you will find the Warhammer 40,000 universe as interesting and diverse as I do. So thank you for watching today about my summary of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching.